All right. Um, let's see. So we don't have any important changes in the agenda, but I do think that Liz's change and Justin's change um, are both worth talking about. Um, Liz's change is like much bigger, so maybe we could start actually with Justin's change because I think that relates to the report that Eric has put together. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. It was weird. Like I've lost the controls to like unmute and share, and so I'm trying to do this from other places. Uh, okay, hold on. I'll just pull up the screenshot I shared earlier. So yeah, this is what I found, and actually this is from this week's changes. Um, there were only a few, and so I started doing them. So this is the first time I've seen this change from this page is being updated to we want to help you find what you were looking for. But it sounds like some other people have seen this already. Um, but I'm interested to see, yeah, like how widespread this might become since this hasn't been changed since the 23rd of last month.
I think we can. I have to fix the thing about why we're not archiving all the right stuff from Internet Archive. It looks like Internet Archive got their issue fixed, so then I need to pull in the last like week and a half's worth of data that we've been missing. But once I've done that, then it's pretty easy to run a query to see of all the pages we're tracking, which ones now look like this. But I would suspect that it's everything under epa.gov/climate change, but we can verify that once I've fixed all of that.
What is for not uh, for anything other than the climate change epa.gov/climate change? What's their normal like page does not exist? Is it the we want to help you find what you're looking for, or is it a page does not exist?
Yeah, so here's just an example. I actually asked myself that when I saw this change the first time, is like, did they change the normal like 404 page or whatever? So yeah, like a fake thing is like epa.gov/radio. And so you get something, yeah, you get that. And so it's different. So this is this page that we saw the change on has specifically to do with the climate change domain, I think.
Because other times you'll get the restricted access message at the top here, but that's not consistent either. Um,
Yeah, so I saw this too, but it wasn't like you're on top of things, Justin. In fact, I saw this like as far as I can tell, like very soon after it actually happened, and just by coincidence. So I just happened to go to epa.gov/climate change because I was doing some term analysis, and I noticed this, the page had been changed from what I'd been used to, and so then I did some quick looking on the Wayback Machine and figured out, oh, this actually was changed in the past 24 hours. So, and that was last Thursday. So it's a very fresh change.
What's up with this down here that it pre-populates sites, production files, signpost CC?
That's the URL. So they just take the words that are in the URL, and like epa.gov/radio, they just take radio and like, oh, you're looking for radio, search. Yeah, it's worthless.
But I think it's really interesting that they specifically tried to have such like friendly language there, as opposed to say, like, one thing they said if they directed it to the splash page for any other like domain that doesn't, or web page that doesn't exist, but they're like, no, we really want to help you find this. It's just that we took down this website like 18 months ago, and like we can't do anything about that now, of course. So like, we'd really like to help if we could.
Yeah, and just to be specific, so the changes that I saw on the page were, obviously the text changed to be kind of snarky, but then also, there was a link to the actual page in the January 2017 snapshot for climate change. So epa.gov/climate change, the January snapshot version of it. And they removed that. So there's no easy way to get to an archived version of epa.gov/climate change now.
And how does that link up to what Toli and Andrew, I think this was really early on in the website monitoring of the stuff that was missing from the snapshot, when even like well beforehand?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. I think one way to answer it is, so I looked, and epa.gov/climate change is still in the snapshot. They just don't link to it anymore. Yeah, I don't know.
Sorry, taking notes. Does anyone want to do a second review on this? I reviewed it. It's really short, because I think it would be a good, like, to kind of like get out pretty soon.
So sorry, just FYI, I looked through the EPA.gov changes really quickly, and there are two other climate change pages that have the same change, and it looks like Rob, you just posted the 125 pages that are looking like this. So this looks pretty systematic.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume, because what's actually happening under the hood is there's another page called like epa.gov/cc/signpost. And I think what they did was they just took epa.gov/climate change/whatever, like no matter what is in there, and they just redirected to that signpost page. And I think they just updated that signpost page to look this way. So I assume, without a deeper, more algorithmic check, that it only affects /climate change, and I assume also that it affects everything under /climate change. But we'll try and do a better check as we get past the Internet Archive brokenness from this past week.
Do you think we should hold off on the report until we have like can say like how many that like kind of definitively if it does or does not affect the whole subdomain?
I would say because I can only easily check without spending a lot more time and work on it. I can only easily check for the pages that we've been tracking. And I think, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that is everything that's under that path or not. And so, like, I'm not sure what I can conclusively say for you.
Yeah,
Eric,
I mean,
were you looking for a list of pages, everything that we track under / climate change, or all the ones that have that look like this now?
all the ones that look like that, because that sounds easier to generate.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that I don't think we need to say everything under, like, I don't think we need to definitively conclude right now that everything under epa.gov/climate change is redirecting to this page. And because that's something we probably should have done months ago or a year and a half ago when they actually started those redirects. We can just say at least 125 pages, 125 pages that redirect to this page are going to have this change, but better worded.
Yeah, presumably aren't being updated anymore, right? Like there's like a deliverable with the previous wording, whereas
yeah, absolutely. I think that's the headline here is like EPA discontinues updating these pages.
right.
Awesome. Does anyone want to give? I'll keep asking and posting, but anyone want to give like a second review to the report that Eric has written up? I reviewed it and think it looks good. And if we kind of update with the number of pages that we know of that redirect to this, like one sentence on that, it could be good to go. Well, okay, I'll ask in channel again, but hopefully we can get that out soon. Awesome. Liz, should we talk about your change?
Yeah, if you want to. Let me pull it up. Yeah, okay. So this was a change in the EPA's subdomain about international cooperation. They waffled about this SZ change before, which Justin pointed out, organization. Organization with an S is the official name of the OECD. Anyway, you look at this top bit and you think that it's not really anything consequential, but then if you scroll down, you see that they edited their description of the OECD to remove statements like it is for governments committed to democracy, which is kind of shady. I kind of doubt that the OECD itself removed that language, but I haven't actually looked. So that would be something to look into. And then further on down the page, they have this description about past work with the OECD. one of which is a report called Environmental Outlook to 2050, Consequences of Inaction, which describes negative environmental consequences of business as usual economics. And yeah, most stuff like this, they don't, like on other pages of this domain, they don't take away this kind of stuff. They just rephrase it to put it in the past tense, or say like previous EPA administrators did such and such. But this one, they actually did take it off. And yeah, they took off some other stuff down here. But yeah, the one on the top was what caught my eye, really. Questions, comments?
I wonder, I haven't looked into it, but we had a couple of changes from other like international relations, related to international relations. And I just wonder if there's any similarities. I haven't actually looked, but what I remember from them were mostly like kind of downplaying the importance of the organization or the partnership. That's not necessarily reflected here, but I think it'd be interesting just to kind of compare. And are there any other pages about like related to this or this group that you know of?
I think they have other OECD pages. I think I've seen changes on this OECD page before. I think what you're talking about, I mean, one of the things that either had a draft report or that actually got put out, I don't remember anymore, is stuff that Kendra put together. Kendra was monitoring this domain before I was. And they removed like a sidebar link describing international priorities. So yeah, there are some earlier changes that are like the EPA sort of downplaying their responsibility or participation in these international activities.
Okay, cool. I'll look into international relations. I'll put that on my to-do list to see what potential next steps might be for this one. It's a doozy, though.
Looks like a bunch of links have been removed too, towards green growth. Some other resources that are still live, just links taken down.
Yeah, those kinds of things I need to look into a bit more, because quite often the EPA does this stuff where they will remove several links from like one page and then sort of refile them under a new header link. So they might have linked to some intermediate page, and I can look and see if those are linked from elsewhere.
Cool. Should we do this ground truthing exercise next?
Happy to. I am also just cognizant of other people who may want to report back on other things, and just for the purposes of making sure we get that in, because I don't think the ground truthing would take that long, but well, we could ground truth for a long time if we wanted to. So I don't want to cut anybody off.
Should we do dev update and then ground truthing?
Okay, I think the two big pieces of news are that Internet Archive had a whole bunch of problems last week, So for the time being, we're missing a little over a week's worth of data. They think there's no actual data loss. Basically just their index that allows you to see a list of all the things that were captured, and therefore how we figure out what data we can pull out of the Internet Archive was broken. And so they spent it takes several days to rebuild because it's huge. And so they think that's mostly fixed now. So I'm going to have to go back and pull old data out. But that's why if you're looking only at Internet Archive related data, you might have seen a lot less of it over the past week, because their system wasn't reporting out anything, basically. And then the other thing is I updated the colors for the diffs, or for the HTML rendered diff the other day. Hopefully those are improved, less hyper-saturated and more readable, yet still colors that are better for colorblind than what we originally had. So let me or Dan or Kevin or anybody on the dev side know if you think they're great, or if you think they're terrible in some respect, or if you have ideas for what would be a better set of colors. I made that change so that it only applies to sort of our environment, because now like Internet Archive is actually using our diffing system. But if everybody feels good about them, then we'll probably make those colors the new default colors instead of the way oversaturated ones. But I just want to make sure we're not constantly changing them and wait until we feel like everybody feels good about it before I make the defaults for everybody, every organization who's using our different tools change.
I like them.
Rob, I think that you addressed this in the Slack channel, but just a question. When we have the Internet Archive resources, like when I have the checkbox use Internet Archive resources, it takes forever to load, and so I always have to uncheck. That I think is something that you know about. Is there have you found that it improves with any kind of thing that I can do, or is that just a known issue?
There's nothing you can do about it, unfortunately. So what's happening there is you're taking, for example, a Versionista snapshot of the actual page itself and combining it with all the images and styles and formatting that were captured by the Internet Archive, because Versionista doesn't capture any of it, so smashing those together. And a lot of pages will delay a little while in drawing themselves if they're still in the middle of downloading all that styling and formatting information. So they'll just stay a white screen until that's ready, or until it's been a really long time and it finally gives up on it. And so what you're encountering is just that the Internet Archive is slow, unfortunately. And there's pretty much nothing we can do about that. When we are pulling in Internet Archive snapshots, we try and archive everything in our own storehouse, so that when we get it from our own storehouse, it's much faster. But that doesn't happen when you have that checkbox for resources from other places.
It seemed like the thing that prompted that change was asking about things not rendering correctly or not loading correctly. And so if you may not need to have that on all the time unless things aren't loading correctly. So I can tell from a lot of my changes, the text changes that are happening, that I don't, necessarily need to see all the stuff rendered to see that happen. So I don't know if that's a requirement to have that checked all the time.
Yeah, I mean, there's from a technical standpoint, there's no requirement one way or the other. You're exactly right. It's sort of, if you pull the resources from the Internet Archive, you're more likely to have a view of the page that overall is more accurate to what you would have seen at the time. But you might have just an accurate view if not. Totally depends on what's happened on that website in the intervening time. So yeah, we could change the default if people would prefer it. I thought I had written it, but maybe I didn't, such that however you left it checked stuck from page to page, but maybe I didn't. I don't know. I don't remember now. So we could also do that. So there's not a default, but your current setting sticks.
Hey, it fixed the DOE formatting issue. It's amazing. I don't think I've thanked you for that yet. Even if it does take a little bit to load, it's awesome.
Yeah, doing my best. Unfortunate trade-offs.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, Eric, how about now?
Okay, so we've got some time here, 25 minutes till 9, but I don't think we'll take that much time. And I'd like to recruit your help in ground truthing some counts the web monitoring research team has made of snapshots of pages in our effort to do a more synthetic, backwards-looking, comprehensive analysis of what we've seen over the past 2 years, right? So we talked about this on Friday. We've seen a lot of changes, and we've documented a number of really important ones, but we're still not necessarily able to say, especially in a quantitative sense, like what has happened across all these pages we've been looking at over the past 2 years. How has language changed? How has access changed? Okay, so we've done we did a preliminary count back in June, and we've been working from that. There were some issues in the way that we counted terms that we've tried to address. And so we have done another count that we will ground truth and see what we think makes sense and work through some of the assumptions that go into how we count a term on a page. And ultimately, the goal here is, I think to come up with that kind of report that says, okay, this is what we've seen, and to do that, keep plugging away on that, and then hopefully get to a point where we finalize Scanner and can do a lot of this, integrate this kind of analysis with Scanner in the sense that we could draw the URLs we're looking at from Scanner, and then also point the public to the changes in the pages that we're looking at in Scanner itself. Right now, these URLs and these snapshots that we're counting terms on are pulled directly from the Wayback Machine for a couple of different reasons that we could get into. But we can, as with Rob's help, there is ways to do this more integrated with Scanner that we've been talking about. But either way, we've got to get our counting down. So we got to figure out how we can count. So I would like your help in doing that. So I have put together a few changes, a few snapshots.
I think he's frozen.
Extraordinarily unfortunate freeze frame.
If one of us can Are y'all still here? My internet
Yeah.
is slow.
Still here, but you're every so often cutting out.
Thanks. Let's see what it looks like if I share my screen. Okay, hopefully we'll stay connected. So I've opened the spreadsheet. And so there's a set of 20 changes up here from the Obama era. So these are all 2016, first half of 2016. And then 20 from the first half of 2018. So pick one, doesn't matter which one. Don't do one that somebody else is doing. But for instance, I'm going to just walk us through this one from the Fish and Wildlife Service's homepage. So we call up this snapshot. It's the closest one to July 1st, working backwards that there was for 2018. And this is what it looks like. Okay, so we have more terms than just this, but these are just ones that we have 56, and we can't look at all 56 right now. So I've just taken some of the first ones. And so really, it's just a matter of, okay, Control F, is the term adaptation on here? No. Okay, let's put a 0 there. Air quality, no. Benefits, 1. And I did this earlier, so I'm not going to bore you with the details. But if you do the rest, it looks like that. And then we can actually check that with what the script came up with. So in the next sheet are the actual answers. And to make it a bit more clear, the difference between the expected and what you will put in. So we missed a couple of the benefits. And that's in part because, well, if you do benefits, it doesn't pick up on some mentions of benefits in this kind of sidebar here. It just picks up on the ones down, or the one down here. Now, in other, so that's actually, there's an issue there that we can talk about some other time probably, but you might run into a lot of this. In every other single domain but Fish and Wildlife Services, we don't count this stuff because this is stuff that's repeated across the entire domain. And it's just going to inflate our overall counts, and it's not particularly meaningful. There's technical reasons why it doesn't work out to exclude these things from Fish and Wildlife Service. So I picked this as an example of like maybe a problematic one. But I am curious to see what we come up with for the other URLs on here. And there's no particular priority, like just pick whichever interests you, and it'll be really helpful information and calibrating our counts of these pages. So you can answer any questions right now. Otherwise, jump in, maybe just do one, and then we can reconvene and talk about some of what we found and some of the differences in our counts versus the scripts count. Does that make sense? Does that sound good?
Yeah, just to double, triple, quadruple check. So we don't want to count things that aren't in the body of the page.
That is the goal this time around. The first time we did it, we counted everything, and we were just getting a lot of like, okay, there's 2 mentions of climate change on this page, or 1 of jobs, and really, and we're seeing that on every EPA page, and that's just because it's in the footer somewhere. And so we really want to pull out, so we can account for that in other ways. We can say, okay, if you visit epa.gov, you're going to see climate change in the footer, or you would have. But we don't need to say that happens on every page. We really want to pull out the page specific stuff. Yeah.
Just making sure I'm using the right link. It's the link in column A.
Sorry, no, it's column B. So column A is the actual URL. Column B is the snapshot of it from the Wayback Machine that we're
Got it.
Our material.
Got it. Okay.
Also, with the Wayback snapshots, there's a part that says like ID underscore slash, and if you get rid of the ID underscore part, then you'll get the like fully rendered, fancified Internet Archive version. If you want to make sure you got the styles and everything.
All right, I see we are diligently plugging away. I want to go ahead and pull us back together. And go over some of what we found and talk about whether it makes sense or not. Because just looking at our differences, there are some differences, and so I'd like to talk about those. So, yeah, if you go to the differences tab of the spreadsheet, you'll notice I put an X in the rows that people looked at. So there's going to be kind of red cells throughout, but only pay attention to the ones that people looked at. So if we just start kind of at the first one that we looked at as a good example. So we found 2 mentions of climate change on this Deepwater Horizon page. And my guess is that those are actually mentions that are in a menu. It may not look like a menu, but we pulled up the source code, or we did the fully rendered version of the page. those are going to be mentions in a menu. It makes sense to me that they're there, but I think the script is doing what it should do, which is excluding those because they're going to be things that are mentioned across of all DOI or were mentioned across all DOI. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So the next page we looked at, a lot of differences. Okay, so this was, nope, wait, I'm getting my numbers wrong. Good, we didn't, we weren't off on this one. We did 8, 9, 10, row 8, 9, 10. Okay, so 8, 9, and 10 we've covered, but then we looked at row 15, which is this page about from the EPA on the Mid-Atlantic. So Gretchen covered this one. And where are we at here? So yeah, same thing. The script picked up one mention of climate change and one mention of climate. And that is going to come in the under the key issues section, which is actually a part of the Mid-Atlantic page. And then the other two mentions of climate and climate change are in the main menu. So that's all just to say that it makes sense from my end that the script is making that count. But I know it looks like there's more mentions on the page. Yeah. And then there's the term compliance. Same thing, it's in a menu. And then we also covered, Liz covered this EIA page, which we counted correctly. So just looking at those 5 changes from the Obama era, like it makes sense to me, like what the script did, and I think it turned out okay. And there's this issue of, well, we're going to count, when we look at the page, we're going to count climate change in the menu, but we're excluding it, the script is excluding it. So yeah, any thoughts and maybe concerns about not counting things in the menu?
I think it makes sense to be trying not to count things in the menu. That's been like long on my list of things to try and do for our like overall pipeline is to, like, when calculating whether a diff matters, do a better job of figuring that out. But understanding when to care about it and when to not is harder in the general case. And so we haven't had time to solve it yet. So this is, I think it seems good.
Yeah, and I mean, that's just excluding tags like nav and header and footer, which doesn't work in the fish and wildlife case because they don't use those HTML tags. They just have classes for their headers and footers. So it's annoying, but yeah. And then the Trump era, it looks like Liz and Jake made some counts, and they turned out as expected. So it's good. If y'all wanted to keep plugging away at this, the top rows on at each section are potentially false negatives, and that they're all 0 counts. and I'm a little concerned about those in particular. It's harder to prove a zero count, and it would require maybe even going to the source code, but I think in general, yeah, I mean, that's one of the stickier issues. Not particularly sure how to ground truth that and to work around potentially false negatives, but
why can you explain that a little bit more? Why you're worried about that?
because maybe it's something wrong with the script. In particular, the way that it's written, this is a reflection of just my bad setting up of things, but the way it works is that every page is first assigned a zero counts for everything. And then if we can't find a snapshot, it gets turned to a different count, like just a random number, 999. But in some cases, because I didn't control for this, if we have problems with the Wayback Machine, it just skips over, and so those zeros might be a technical artifact rather than an actual count of the page as zero. But I don't think that's the case in these cases. I'm pretty sure they're just zeros.
Cool.
Yeah, that was actually more successful than I thought it might be, which is good. Yeah, I mean, there's, again, some issues with the Fish and Wildlife Service, but there might be ways to just go and subtract 2 mentions of climate change from every Fish and Wildlife Service page or something like that, retroactively. Yeah. We also pulled links for 2000 EPA pages, and to see how those EPA pages linked to one another and link to each other now, and what, if any, differences there are. If those pages, some of those pages no longer link to each other. There's a lot of processing of the data that needs to be done first, but that's another dimension of some research going forward. Because we've seen the islanding and isthmusing, but to assess that across a lot of EPA, can potentially show us some things we missed, and show us in general more of the scope of that islanding and isthmusing.
Awesome. I think ground truthing that data set could be really interesting too.
Yeah, that'd be a hard one to ground truth. Well, yeah, I mean, you would ground truth particular components of it, right? Because it's, for each page, we have information on whether it links to actually like 9,000 other pages. So obviously not every page links to 9,000 other pages, but it maybe links to 100, 150, which would be an investment to like go and make sure that it actually links to each of those pages that it says it links to. Yeah.
Eric, can you just use Moz? Like, I don't know how you're figuring out the linking with the links that you pulled, but a different way to ground truth it without, having a person go in is just to have some other service determine whether they link to each other, or have someone else write an algorithm independently of you and compare your results.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Maybe somebody else. And I mean, the way we determine linking to is just whether there's an actual HTML link element in the page, which they're pretty standardized tools for pulling that information out. So it's a lot less fudgy, I think, than counting, where like tokenizing words is really actually kind of tricky. But that's just my sense of it. Yeah, I want to have more faith in the link data. Maybe, yeah, we'll get to that someday.
Awesome. Well, we are just running up against the hour. So everything else in here, I think we can just skim over or, read. We don't need to discuss on the phone tonight. Thank you, Eric, for that exercise. And thank you all for meeting. And I look forward to seeing you guys again via Slack.
Good night, y'all.
Thanks all.